What's the worst thing someone tried to correct you about for something you specialize at? Story 1. A new house gets built next door to mine, and shortly after the owners move in, they knock on my door to complain that my house is built too high. I explain that my house was built on flat ground, and their builder has built their house lower and undercut my fence. The guy proceeds to give a long-winded spiel about how earthworks are done, and my house is too high, and I have to fix it. I then explain that I do earthworks for a living. Have done the earthworks for 300 plus houses in my suburb alone, and around 1,200 in the local area. I name his builder, site supervisor, engineer, the exact floor levels in the street, and the law that says that he has to pay to fix my fence. He still hasn't paid, and legal procedures are beginning soon. Story 2. My art teacher in school took the yellow paint from me and drew a massive sun in the corner of my picture. I was 5, and I was already freaking brilliant at drawing the suns. The cow. Story 3. I'm a Harley mechanic, and I swear most Harley riders have to pretend they know everything about their bike. I don't even argue with them anymore. I just tell them what's up, and if they want to debate about it, I say okay and walk away. I know a guy who built his Harley entirely, or almost entirely, from other parts. His party trick is to ask other enthusiasts what year model it is. The correct answer is all of them. That actually is a pretty great party trick. Personally, I don't understand why people think knowing everything about all vehicles is such a bragging right, unless they're actually a mechanic. It's no different from knowing a lot about anything else that isn't your job. At the end of the day, if someone needs help, it's still a mechanic they'll trust. When a car owner needs a new transmission, they don't call an Uber driver because they just assume another car owner will know everything they need. I'm sure that comparison offended at least one car or bike owner, but that's what the comments are for. Story 4. I got shut down by this actually. I was arguing with my cousin while we were on an old hydraulic elevator. I said the hydraulic elevators are slow as crap and have far more failures than cable elevators. The guy standing across from us laughs, shakes his head and says he's an elevator repairman, and that's not true at all. Shamed. Elevator knowledge is very up and down. Story 5. So, Canadian lawyer here. I used to do primarily firearms law. I taught a course in firearms law at university. I'd been consulted on it by lawyers. I've had judges tell other lawyers to phone me with firearms law questions. I had a law student telling me that I was wrong about firearms law on a particular topic. Eventually, they went and cited a particular case, which I politely advised them they were wrong about, but they keep going on, talking about how just because I'm a lawyer and they're a student doesn't mean they're wrong. Meanwhile, I'm just holding my tongue. Eventually, someone else chimed in to be like, don't you know who that is? And the case you cited was a case he personally argued and won on. Satisfying AF. If a heaven exists, I think I'd just want to have it be a never-ending series of these moments where I'm the expert. I saw that ending coming from a mile away. The student technically had a point, in the sense that professors don't get everything right all the time. The thing is that it's also pretty common for professors to have field experience in their area of expertise. If you're going to argue about a legal case with a law professor who handles the specific area of law the case is concerned with, you might want to double-check first and make sure they didn't play a hand in it. Story 6. I'm a knife maker. A friend tried to tell me that the curve on the katana was forged in. No, it's made by the differential hardness in the quench. He then tried to tell me that tempering a knife meant hardening it. I see that you actually studied the blade. Story 7. I work in lightning protection here in the States. I did the estimating and the designs for the largest company in the Southeast and have, for going on 7 years, been certified through our industry's certification company. The amount of engineers and architects that love to argue with me about the code is astounding. I live that code. Being I estimate and design systems, my main job is to know that code. The worst was the Army Corps of Engineers. We had a project that their designer designed that was in the big package drawings. Pretty standard. Pick out the materials requested and ignore the incorrect design. That is how we bid it, won it, and designed it. This would have provided them with a fully certified system. In our business, a UL Master Label certification is as close to a requirement for every job as anything can be. 2 weeks after we submit our design, it comes back with a revised or resubmit stamp and a very snarky demand from the corps that we change our design to the one provided in the bid package. I went back and forth on email and calls with the engineers, trying to explain to them that their system would not work. was potentially a dangerous hazard, and ultimately could not be certified or warranty. That came back basically with, "We don't care what you say, we know better, do it." So I did, designed exactly like they had, and put a disclaimer on the drawing saying there would be issues and we were not responsible. A few months go by, it's installed and ready for certification. They call the inspector out and he fails it without even getting on the roof. The Army tried to come back at us. I politely forward the countless email chains to the officer in charge. Now they scramble to get it up to code. As a consequence, it resulted in us issuing a change order to bring it up to code that was around 75% of the original cost of the project. God dang it. Wasted tax dollars via stupidity. I see it so much as a government contractor. It's also worth noting that the American government has been successfully sued by Lockheed Martin in the past for allegedly stealing their designs. So it's possible that this country isn't really putting as much money or education into finding qualified engineers as they should. Given how much money is spent on the military in particular, it's worrisome to think about where that money is going if so little of it seems to be going into personnel. And while I don't know enough about engineering to say this with confidence, I can't help but wonder if, in a roundabout way, that might not almost be a safety issue. Story 8. I studied history at university and worked for a while as a tour guide in Prague, Czech Republic. I had a customer once on a walking tour of the city get really snarky with me because I called the river running through the city the Vltava. He declared to the whole tour that that wasn't its name. I asked him if he'd heard it referred to as the Mulde, as that was the German name for the river during the Habsburg era when German was the official language. But he said no, and I was stupid. He said the river was called the Danube. I pointed out to him that the Danube doesn't run through Prague and asked if maybe he was thinking of Brno, but no. He had definitely read in a guidebook that it was the Danube, and why the heck was he paying money for this tour if a guide didn't even know what the river was called? At which point another tourist in the group showed him her guidebook where it clearly said Vltava. Then another showed him a map, and another showed him another guidebook, and so on, until the whole group had basically showed him what a trouser he was being. He didn't apologize, of course, but at least he shut up for the rest of the tour. Story 9. I'm not really specialized, but a Redditor tried correcting me about the geography of my country, Norway, claiming that it was very much flat like all the other Nordic countries, and he refused to believe me when I told him that it's the opposite and it's filled with mountains. Story 10. I'm majoring in archaeology. I had a guy start talking to me about dinosaurs. I correct him and say it's a fairly common misconception, but paleontology and archaeology are two different fields, and I'm studying humans, not dinosaurs. He doubles down and insists I need to know about dinosaurs, because what do you do if you're digging up rooms and find a dinosaur fossil? Call a paleontologist. He smugly tells me I'll be useless in the field if I don't know about dinosaurs, and I better start registering for paleontology courses, and leaves. I still don't know about dinosaurs. Look, I only know about archaeology from what I've seen in Indiana Jones movies, but I'm pretty sure the only things an archaeologist needs to know about are people, artifacts, and aliens. Snakes are optional. But the real question is what this guy was thinking when he brought up the hypothetical situation of OP uncovering a room and finding dinosaur fossils. He's basically talking about finding proof that dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time. I actually don't even know if you would call a paleontologist at that point, since you would have proven they've been wrong about basically everything for as long as they've existed. Story 11. I had to leave the welding subreddit for this reason. I'm a welder on nuclear submarines with over 14 different X-ray welding qualifications at this company alone. I would constantly get into arguments with people who are new and have no real-world experience with welding. The amount of wrong information being thrown out left and right over there is insane. There are plenty of very knowledgeable folks there, but they're overshadowed by the ignorant, which sounds like what aliens would probably say when describing Earth to other aliens. Story 12. You wouldn't believe the number of times people try to tell me that people only become diabetic if they eat too much sugar, and insist they are right. I'm a type 1 diabetic, diagnosed at 14 months. Was I drinking soda from my bottles and using ring pops as pacifiers then? Story 13. Not me, but yesterday I was at a physics lecture given by Donna Strickland, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics last year for her work in lasers. During the questions afterward, some kid, either undergrad or young grad, I didn't know him, was all like, I have a comment more than a question. and proceeded to explain some laser technique to her and that she should use it. The response was, "Yes, we are well familiar with it in my lab and use it." I was just kind of amazed at the moxie of a kid who tried to tell a Nobel laureate how to do her research in a room packed with hundreds of people. There's one in every field. I've known a few ancillary candidates in my field just starting out, working with kids with autism who think they have it all figured out because they're a psych major and took child development classes. This is a dicey thread for me to comment on at all, because I can't say anything about any of these fields without potentially sounding like the exact type of person they're complaining about, which is basically a normal Tuesday for me in our comment section, but I digress. The point is, I actually need to disagree with this OP. It's not that there's one in every field, it's that there's one in every field and about 1 billion people from no field whatsoever who simply think they know everything. If you talk about anything on Reddit, from sports to medicine, expect to get corrected at some point by someone who's barely qualified to stock groceries. If you somehow haven't seen this before, then welcome to the internet. You must be new here. It's awful, but we hope you have fun. Story 14. I'm a climber. People tell me to wear gloves all the time. There's a form of climbing where gloves would be somewhat acceptable, although even then a bit questionable. But in free climbing, bouldering, you cannot wear gloves because your fingers actually allow you to grip onto smaller pieces of rock. I totally get you. Got asked that question a few times and then offered the people to join me and wear gloves. One person joined me once and tried it seriously with those thin woolen gloves, and she realized she had been wrong. She is now my reference person if someone asks a question again. Story 15. I'm a food scientist, so this happens basically all the goddamn time. One person insisting that MSG gives her terrible migraines. She was eating pizza at that exact time. Someone insisting that you should drink apple cider vinegar to alkalize your body to prevent diseases. I point out that's an acid. He insists it's not. Apple cider vinegar. Another person telling me how agave nectar is so much healthier and how I should replace all the sugar I eat with it. I tell her it's just a fructose-glucose mix and you might as well use corn syrup. She got really mad, like irrationally mad. There's so much misinformation about food that this is basically constant for me. Story 16. Asked her to do the rear brakes on a classic Vespa. I think it may have been a 200 Raleigh, not sure. It was decades ago. So the owner and his pal turn up with the scooter. I loosen off and remove the rear rim and tire, loosen the hub nut, and go to put the rear rim and tire back on. "Oh, hey, wait a minute, mate. What the F are you doing?" "I'm getting the hub off." "Not like that, you're not." So I tell them I'm going for a cuppa and a smoke, and I'll be back when they've removed the hub themselves. 4 hours. 4 bloody hours they were at it. Hub wouldn't budge, not 1 millimeter. Getting bored, I go back to them, pin the rim and tire on, screw in and tighten 2 wheel bolts, and using a mallet, hit 3 times in one point, then 3 times 180 degrees opposite. Rinse and repeat 3 or 4 times, whole rim tire hub assembly lifts off. I charge them 1/2 a day labor for a 30-minute job. This is when it makes the least amount of sense for people to argue with their specialists. If you're paying a flat rate, it's still not advisable to question someone with more experience than you if you want the job done right. But when part of your payment goes to hourly labor fees, why in the world would you want to waste time arguing? If you really knew better, would you be taking it to someone else in the first place? I can't imagine you would. Story 17. A guy that considered himself to be a music maven tried to correct me when I mentioned Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy. He insisted that J.S. Bach composed it, when in fact Bach never composed any symphonies, not to mention that Ode to Joy is one of Beethoven's most famous pieces. Story 18. I'm a professional pastry cook. The general manager at my new job tried to teach me how to crack eggs. Story 19. That flying is a dangerous mode of travel. I'm air traffic controller. A plane crash is news. A car crash is business as usual. Story 20. I didn't specialize in it, but when I worked at the deli in my local grocery store, I had a guy come in asking for some sliced ham. I asked him if he wanted Black Forest ham, honey baked, or mesquite ham. He looked at me and said, "It's not mesquite, it's mystique." I pointed at the sign and label on the actual effing ham that said mesquite ham. But he still corrected me. I gave up and gave him his dang Mystique ham. This was a good 15 years ago, and I'm still mad about it. My hometown is Mesquite. That cracks me up. I'm going to start calling it Mystique. Sometimes I wonder if the antagonists in stories like this might actually realize they're wrong, yet refuse to budge because they don't want to look foolish. Unless the guy just plain couldn't read, pointing to the sign on the ham should have ended the argument. But I feel like some people think there's somehow more shame in admitting when you're wrong than there is in simply accepting it and recovering gracefully. There's not. Sticking to your guns after being discredited will always make you look 1,000 times worse. Not to mention, this is the kind of argument where you would pull out your phone and try to prove yourself right if you were really so sure about it. Story 21. My wife has a friend who studied zoology who once told me that cows can't run or jump. I grew up with them. I, more than once, had to run after or away from them after they had jumped a fence. Cows are freaking fast when they want to be. Our neighbors had a cow who learned how to kneel down and crawl across cattle guards. She roamed the area for years, couldn't be contained. Story 22. How to spell my own name, which I'm sure I know how to spell after all these years. I have a friend who likes to tell people my middle name is Nebraska. It's not. My middle name is Braska. But I've had to argue with several people that, yes, I know what Mark told you, and yes, I know that you've never heard that name before, but it's my goddang name and I know what it is. Story 23. I'm an identical twin and a big biology nerd. I had someone insist that fraternal twins are paternal twins and explain why she'll have some because they leapfrog through her husband's family. Aw, that's rough. Don't know how her husband's genes will get her to produce 2 eggs, though. I was reading a fertility book the other day, and I never realized, but identical twins isn't associated with family history genetics. Story 24. I'm a nurse, and I particularly like it when people try to inform me about medication. But I usually take paracetamol every hour, they say, and that's why you're here with liver problems, Karen. I had a woman once tell me that I didn't know anything about cancer or cancer treatment, and that she only needed essential oils and greens to cure her colorectal cancer. I literally am the cancer pharmacist, and she came to us for treatment. If people want to try natural cures, that's entirely their business. What I don't understand is why they'd go to a doctor if that's what they want. Do they think they can't get essential oils without a prescription? Do they think their insurance would cover it if a doctor wrote it down on a prescription pad? Because I'm not in medicine, but I feel pretty certain they'd be wrong on both of those counts. Story 25. Someone in my school, USA, tried to correct my Spanish. I'm Puerto Rican, a Spanish-speaking colony of the US, and then I started talking full Spanish, and he walked away. I remember a Spanish teacher from Colombia trying to correct my Spanish, and when I insisted that this is how we speak in Puerto Rico, she countered that she's got a Puerto Rican friend who doesn't speak like I do at all. Wasn't until she met my mother that she finally shut the F up. Had never heard of dialects before, I guess. Story 26. That moment when, after 20 minutes of arguing about something, the person Googles it to prove you're wrong with that look on their face. The shame when they see you were right all along, priceless. I'm guilty of this last year, but the guy said Earth has different gravity in some parts. It was so absurd that I argued. I was wrong. He is a pastry chef and not a physicist, but still. This can be humbling. What's important is just what the person does afterwards. If they can accept the proof that they're wrong, then they're all right in my book. For instance, I once got into a heated argument with an ex because she didn't believe the Red Hot Chili Peppers had written the song Kryptonite. So I Googled it, and Google said it was 3 Doors Down. I then had to Google the Mandela effect so I could prove to my ex why I was still right. She still claims I was wrong to this very day. Some people just can't learn humility. Story 27. My height. I'm 6 feet 10. Guy comes up and says he's 6 feet 10, so I must be like 7 feet. Man, you're 6 feet 6 maximum. And then we went back and forth about that for a bit. Also had the other side of that coin where someone will ask how tall I am, and I'll reply 6 feet 10, and they just straight up won't believe me and will tell me I'm lying. Like, what? Why? What would I possibly stand to benefit? Story 28. People without their ID constantly try and quote various laws about being able to order alcohol when with parents. I work in a pub, which is part of a chain. We're regularly tested to see if we card under 21. No, I'm not handing you a pint when you can't prove you're old enough and wouldn't be willing to pay the 1,000-pound fine I'd receive. Story 29. Oh boy, where do I begin? I'm a professional music producer. Have been for years. My productions get great reviews from people and are often singled out by music magazines and other industry professionals. People who know what they're doing are nothing but nice and supportive. But I get crap from salty bedroom guitarists all the freaking time. Seems like every time I produce a young band, there's this one guy there who thinks he knows it all because he watched a YouTube video. The bass knob on the amp should be set at 10, because 5 years ago I heard that Tremonti sets his bass knob at 10. There should be no effects or editing on the vocals, because Black Sabbath in the 70s didn't have vocal effects. Double tracking guitars. What the freak? Nirvana had one guitar player, and they were the biggest band on the planet. We're recording only one take. Black Sabbath in the 70s didn't have vocal effects yet, but they did have Ozzy frickin' Osbourne, and you ain't him. I was actually waiting to see if entertainment would make it into this thread. Glad we managed to get it in just under the wire. The thing about entertainment is that every form of media is highly subjective. However, you should still trust people's experience. If you're hiring a marketing firm to market your vlog, trust they know more about marketing than the average vlogger. If you're hiring someone to produce your music, assume they know something about music production. I'm not sure anyone can succeed in any creative medium without help from others. And as I said earlier, hiring someone in the first place is basically a tacit admission that you need help. Rejecting that help because you read a few trivia facts or a couple of online articles that sounded neat to you sounds like a pretty easy way to fail. If this thread has taught us anything, it should be that experience trumps everything else in 9 out of 10 situations, no matter what field you're talking about. Give others the faith they've earned. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.